Welcome to the Dispense Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Sven Hosford. Dispense Magazine brings you news and information for patients and physicians about medical marijuana. Whatever you and your doctor might talk about, that's what we'll talk about on this podcast. In this episode of Cannabis Conversations, we continue with part 2 of medical marijuana for first-time users. Solevo Wellness in Pittsburgh hosts this conversation with Dr. Adam Rothschild and holistic practitioner Mandi Babkes. In part 2, we dive deeper into some things every user should know. This includes the safety of vaping and smoking, and the various ways to adjust your dosage. Now let's get back to Solevo Wellness, recorded live in front of an audience on August 30th, 2018. All right, Solevo is hosting this podcast, and we want to thank them again. And Patrick is going to tell us about the support groups. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great.
Again, so we giving back and recognizing some needs after we've been open for a while, getting to know our patients. We found that there's definitely a need for support groups that we could host here. Absolutely, again, free of charge, no charge to get into any of these events here. So the support groups would be more of a small, intimate feel rather than maybe a really big event. Focused on certain conditions or certain symptoms of conditions, maybe not even the conditions that are approved, but symptoms that lead to having that condition.
Right. You want to keep these small and intimate and so you don't want to do, you said like pain, you'd fill up the Civic Arena.
Exactly. So like say fibromyalgia, we could do something like that and have a smaller group, whether they're patients or they are caregivers, people. We could have them all in here to just bounce ideas, or if they're new patients, hey, I've tried something that's not quite working yet. I didn't find that right thing, but what did you try? And I tried this. And again, everybody's different with what they take, but at least to get the ideas are thrown around and maybe some answers or some more confidence in their decisions.
That's a really valuable service, I think, that you're doing here. I know so many people, there's so much education needed on so many levels. It's really wonderful to have this kind of an education focused specifically on whatever condition it is.
Yes, and one other, a little bit more broad one we're going to do is our first stab at this would be for pediatrics. And we can talk more about that later.
We'll get into that one.
That because there's different ones for that, but I think we would. There's a lot of need out there. We talk to the caregivers and the parents a lot, and they're just, it's a very complex subject sometimes, and they need support.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you for doing that. That's a wonderful service.
Sure.
So Patrick Gannon with Solevo Wellness here in Squirrel Hill. And you guys ready? Take a deep breath. We're on to part 2 now. We're going to talk about not just what new users need to know, but something every user should know, some of the basics. One thing I wanted to touch on, a question from the last segment, Dr. Rothschild, is when you talk about vaping, is it safe for the lungs? Is there any damage to the lungs when you vape?
So the shorter answer is probably not. Let's compare vaping to smoking, for example.
Well, that was the next question, actually.
May I go forward with that?
Please.
Okay, because it brings it together. So when you smoke cannabis or cigarettes or anything, you are creating tar. You are creating various other compounds in there that come from the oxidizing, or other than the combustion, which is oxidizing, of the various materials that are in cannabis. We know in general that tar is bad for you. It is an irritant. There are various things in there that are carcinogens. With cannabis, there actually has been no proven cancer-causing properties of smoking cannabis, but that may very well be just because what we see with there could be different reasons, but if you compare it to cigarettes, for example, most people don't just smoke one cigarette a week or a day. They are smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so even just the volume of smoke, if people smoked as much cannabis as they smoke cigarettes, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a carcinogenic effect there. But regardless of that, smoke in and of itself is irritating to the lungs. And so when you compare that to vaporizing, let's just talk about vaporizing flower right now using a specialized electronic device. It heats up. So let me take a step back. So the way that if medical cannabis patients in Pennsylvania are going to use flower, we are supposed to vaporize it. They make specialized electric devices that you take your cannabis flower, you grind it up, you put it into a little bowl in the device, which has an electric heating element in there. That heats it up. It vaporizes the active ingredients, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, and the various other phytochemicals that are in there, and just creates a vapor, and you inhale the vapor. So if we just talk about that, then that inherently seems like it should be a lot safer. It certainly does not have the same irritants from the smoke that combusting cannabis would be. Now we compare that to the other vaporizable forms of cannabis. So again, the most popular being the pre-filled vape pen cartridges. There is some controversy with the vape pen cartridges. Different companies make them in different ways. There are different extraction methods for it. There is a butane extraction method. There's a supercritical CO2 extraction method. There's an alcohol extraction method. All the products we have in Pennsylvania, people sometimes worry about the residual butane in that process. It actually creates, many people argue, a better product, but there is a risk of residual butane there. So there's a concern about that. Everything in Pennsylvania has been tested so we can be sure that there's no residual butane. That being said, the problem or the potential problem with the cartridges is that when you create what they call hash oil, in order to make it liquid, you generally have to thin it out with something. And there are different products that can use to thin it. Traditionally, what was used was a combination of propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. Propylene glycol is an irritant. There are some issues with that. Most people have stopped putting propylene glycol into most producers have stopped putting that into their cartridges. Some still do use vegetable glycerin. This is a vegetable derived product. There's some thoughts this may be an irritant. Other products that are used to thin out the oil are terpenes. Terpenes are small molecular weight aromatic compounds, otherwise known basically as essential oils. Terpenes are products that are present in many different plants. That I'm sure Mandi uses some of these, and not just related with the CBD stuff, but also with some of the other herbal stuff. And terpenes themselves can be used as a solvent of sorts to thin it out. Some of the terpenes that are used are plant-derived terpenes. Oftentimes are plants other than cannabis. Other terpenes are cannabis-derived terpenes. This is the best products that are out there. Yet other products are synthetic terpenes, and there are some thoughts that some of these synthetic products may have some adverse effects, but nobody really knows. So that's the long answer. The shorter answer is vaping seems to be safe, certainly safer than smoking.
Well, I think we're going to touch on something that somebody was asking about earlier, and that is, what if you start using this medical cannabis stuff and it doesn't work? What's your strategies for moving forward? Do we keep trying different products? Do we try it stronger? Or, a lot of this whole industry is the fact that there wasn't any FDA testing. We're basically the test rats right here, right?
Yeah. So what I tell patients is so cannabis is an incredibly safe drug. As this, it allows us some leeway in using it. Mm-hmm. Cannabis is what I call, it's the ultimate N of 1 trial. An N of 1 trial is something that we use in clinical medicine where we don't know if this is going to work for you. We have no data to support it, but we're going to give it a shot. And if it seems to work, then great. That's cannabis is the ultimate drug for an N of 1 trial. And so, if a patient says that cannabis isn't working for them, there are several different parameters that you can play with. There is dose. You can always go up on the dose. There is dose form. If they were inhaling it and that wasn't doing it for them, you can try a tincture. You can try an oral form. There is whether a product is sort of full spectrum or whether it's limited. So certain preparations maintain more of the other potentially beneficial phytochemicals certainly any like natural flower product is going to have all the phytochemicals in there. Whereas you get to some of the distillates, and you've stripped them out in the distillation process. Rick Simpson oil has a lot of the stuff left in there, so that's sometimes a product that people will try.
And full spectrum is a key word because it takes advantage of the entourage effect.
Correct.
You want to talk a little bit about the entourage effect
Sure.
and how that works?
The entourage effect is it's a hypothesis that says that the medicinal benefits of cannabis are derived not just from one or two cannabinoids, but the entire set of phytochemicals that are present in there, and how they interact with each other and with the various receptors and enzymes in the body, actually. So the main things that people talk about, the main different types of compounds are the cannabinoids. These are compounds that are produced only in cannabis plants, and I include hemp in the general cannabis family. These include THC, CBD, as we've talked about, and some other ones, CBC, CBN, various ones whose names I don't do a good job of pronouncing, so I'm not going to attempt to right now. CBG, did I say that one? I don't know. I like saying CBG.
Yeah, I like that one too.
So the thought, the hypothesis is that the interaction of all of these together creates a synergistic effect, and this is anecdotally. A lot of patients who have tried, so Marinol is a synthetic THC. It's been available for years, been used in cancer patients for nausea, and also in HIV patients for wasting syndrome. But there are a lot of patients who anecdotally report that Marinol, or dronabinol, that's the chemical name for synthetic THC, was not effective for them, but when they use full spectrum cannabis, this is actually helpful for them. Again, this is only anecdotal, this is not proven, right. but this is one of the data points that supports the notion of the entourage.
But taking that back to our original question then about what strategies to use, one of the strategies can be to go more for the whole plant varieties or to switch the different strains.
Correct.
Yeah.
That was what I was going to to talk about next. Thank you for bringing that up.
I'm glad we got you back there.
Yeah. And so there are there are many different strains of cannabis that are out there, and any given strain has its own unique chemo profile. Cannabis strains are largely, if you were to do the chemical analysis, they're largely characterized by the various cannabinoids and the various terpenes that are in there. People will you throw out the terms indica, sativa, and hybrid as broad ways of describing the expected effects of a given strain of cannabis. It turns out these terms are basically, they are scientifically somewhat meaningless today, because almost all of the cannabis strains that we have out there are some type of hybrid over generations. But yeah, certainly there are the effects that patients get from one strain can be very different from effects from another strain, and so there is just the expectation. I always prepare patients for this, that there is going to be trial and error. For a lot of patients, no matter what they try, it's going to be helpful for them. You might be able to gild the lily by getting a little bit, something a little bit more ideal for them. But for other patients, there may be a particular profile that might be best for them. There are yet other patients where no matter what they try, cannabis just might not be helpful for them, and that happens sometimes, just as it happens with any other drug.
Yeah. Can we take the mic back to him?
Am I understanding it correctly then? If you are taking a tincture and it's not doing anything for you, changing to another tincture could be everything.
Correct. It might be, it might be just changing to something with, no matter what the strain, it might be the CBD to THC ratio and concentration that's important to you, or it might be some of the other phytochemicals that might be present in that tincture.
So can you ask for different strains of the tincture and the different ratios?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, that's very well explained by the group at Solevo here, or
Sativa.
That'd be a good
That's
name.
good.
Yeah. Sativa Wellness.
It's a
We're
whole
changing
new-
the
it's a
name.
whole new strain for you
Our
guys.
competitor on the street,
Sativa.
Indica Wellness. Yeah.
Indica. But it was like sativa.
So
Sativa, yeah.
Sativo.
Yeah, Sativa.
Good.
Indico.
Indico.
That's a good name. Someone should have used that. Yeah.
So could the varying effectiveness of different strains and different products, dosage forms, frequencies, etc., the varying effectiveness across different people be due to simply differences within the plant itself? Could they also be due to differences between the people, rather like your difference in genetic makeup, your enzyme profile, just as some drugs are some people are more sensitive to some prescription medications and less sensitive to others?
You want to take that one, Mandy?
Sure.
Because you're everyone's different kind of gal.
I am. Yeah. I do believe that because I do believe everyone is different, and so each and every one of us requires a different amount, a different strain of anything. So I think it, makes sense to have some trial and error. I think it's also important to have somebody or a team, which that kind of comes into play too, helping, because we don't really want people to get discouraged if something doesn't work, because you're investing time and money and, more time not feeling well, and it can be discouraging. So I think that, how the body processes and breaks things down also is really important in this case. So the liver is a huge player with cannabis and with CBD. So how a person's body can handle or tolerate or break down, I think it depends upon what they're experiencing, what their ailments are, what their diagnoses are. For example, if you have diabetes or you have, I'm spacing on, but let's talk about, diabetes, because that is the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the kidneys. So I do believe that CBD, and I've experienced it with patients, CBD and THC and cannabis definitely benefits, but each and every person is going to need a different amount, and each and every person is going to need perhaps a different strain. So even if somebody, this is my full-on belief, even if I have a group of 5 people that are diagnosed with diabetes, each and every person is going to require a different amount or a different protocol or regime of anything that they need, because just because you have the same diagnosis doesn't mean you're the same makeup and the same body. Does that sort of answer? And genetically, obviously genetics and epigenetics plays a role in this. But it just comes to that same idea that each and every one of us is different. So we're not cookie cutter figures. So, that's probably one of my issues with traditional medicine in general, is that, we create a pill and everybody takes it, but how many people have issues or problems? I've worked with a man right now for 10 years who, he's old school. He's part of the 5%, but he takes CBD, but he also is on medications. And for the last 6 months, it's going through all these different medications for blood pressure. That's what it was, diabetes, blood pressure, because they're, and it's like trial and error, but it's somebody's life. So why not have a little bit more trial and error with something that isn't going to have the side effects, or, all of those could cause, all of the long list of jeopardizing,
Hey, Becca.
Would you normally recommend trial and error for your patients?
The trial and error. Is that
no,
the question? Does
right.
everything need to be trial and error?
So I do some non-traditional work in my practice. I'm very intuitive. I do some testing techniques that I can really pinpoint and sense what my patients require. And so from the herbs that I use, be it CBD or cannabis or other herbs, also the doses, and also knowing, we may start with this dose, but it can shift, and I like to aim for shifts to happen quickly, because I don't believe that everybody needs to be on something or some things forever, but I do believe that our body has the ability to upregulate and to maintain something that I call a baseline. So we live in this world, it's very deficient. So anything that can enhance and support us so that we can regain the tools that we don't have. So to answer that question, I do believe that with me, I can pinpoint and let people know specific doses. So even with CBD, if somebody comes to me, I like to see them, but I don't generally like to sell herbs without having even a small consultation with people. But
that's really a large part of the problem with the industry when doctors say there's not enough research, it's true that kind of questions, what dosage, what strains work for what conditions, just in general is very difficult to pinpoint.
Yes.
And then when you throw in the factor which you just talked about earlier about everybody's different. So
everybody, and it's a huge expense, so it's an expense of time and patience and energy, and people are ill or not feeling well, and you become desperate and hopeless, and that brings us into this emotional component of needing to believe that you can get well and that you will see benefits. So, and then the financial investment too, because it's like, okay, I just spent $80 on this and it's not worth, so I mean that's a big issue too. So I think as far as how I work, I can, if you believe in alternative and you believe in what is not, traditional, I do have the ability to pinpoint specific doses and what somebody might need. And as far as herbs go, and I don't believe that, it's only cannabis. I think that we need other tools that are essential that, again, we don't get from this world anymore because we're very deficient in minerals. Our soil is so deficient in minerals. Compared to the 1920s, we would have to eat, at this point, probably 94 to 112 peaches just to get the vitamin A and K that we got from the soil in the 1920s. So we don't have the tools to germinate and allow our bodies to oxygenate and have life. So we really do need to retrieve like a vitamin D and minerals that will allow our body to be able to absorb what we're putting into our bodies, be it food or anything.
Can you get the microphone back to him?
It'd be better for someone like us to find a variety and a ratio and then figure out the delivery system, or see which delivery system we're most comfortable with, and then work with the different strains or just the CBD or whatever.
You want to handle that, Dr. Rothschild?
Sure. I would recommend you choose a delivery system first, and start somewhere that seems reasonable as far as product selection and dose. And I will tell you that the relationship that you as a would-be, or are you currently a medical cannabis patient or?
Yes.
Okay, so that you as a medical, the relationship that you as a medical cannabis patient build with the staff at the dispensary is an incredibly important relationship. These are not just retail salespeople. These are members of your care team, and very important members. These are folks who, when you go in every month or 2 months, however often you're going in, you're going to tell them how what you had affected you, whether good or bad, and they will help steer you towards either changing a regimen or switching up your products to try to get you to where you want to be. Different conditions seem to respond better to different, say, CBD to THC ratios. So there's always, you always start somewhere that's reasonable, and then you make adjustments based on that. Did that answer your question or no?
Sort of.
I think also it's not to take it away, but when you go to the dispensary, it shouldn't be that you're just walking in there not knowing anything and just going shopping. Feel comfortable. I'm speaking for the dispensaries. I feel comfortable asking questions and telling them what your experiences are and what your recommendations are, because that is the role. And that's when a good dispensary, when they're able to be almost like your pharmacy, when you ask a pharmacist questions or you don't know what the side effects are or anything like that, they're there to help you. And it's also important to just have a full-on team, or even the recommending doctor, or anybody, even me. If you ever have questions, you can always contact me just for questions, but I think it's really important because it's foreign and it's kind of intimidating. The first time I ever went to a dispensary, not in Pennsylvania, in Colorado, it's sort of intimidating. And it's overwhelming, and you don't really know. And so I think that can create a little bit of fear and uncomfortability. So, it seems that Solevo is a place to be for your dispense, but just making sure that you just, know that it's okay to, ask questions and to be like, all questions, like that old school way of like no questions dumb or no questions wrong. But in this case, it's learning, and you want to, and it's your body and it's your health, and it's something you've been experiencing for, I don't know, it could be one day or it could be 20 years. But if it was even one day, you're putting forth the effort, and it's admirable to try something new that can help you. And I think that's great for everybody that's doing that here. And so it's important. And if you don't like the team at the dispensary, then don't get discouraged. You find somewhere else, but because I think that's
But the team here is very good.
No, I'm not. No, but I'm just saying in general.
Let's just make that point here.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, right. Yeah. So here, but yeah, I just think that's probably because it is. It's it's foreign, it's scary, it's intimidating, all those things. So.
We had a question over here.
Hi, I have two questions. One, for Mandi, because you said you have a holistic approach and you believe in alternative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
What tools do you use to measure your outcomes?
Good question. So I definitely use not medical, but alternative medical approaches. I again look at everybody as different. I use different means of figuring out what is going on and what imbalances are happening in the body. I take, again, a very holistic approach. So physical is not the only thing. Emotional, external traumas, I call them interferences, really. So it could be a physical interference, a trauma, a surgery, even whiplash, even something that happened when you were 1 and you don't even remember it. Oftentimes I can even root it to something that happened in the womb. So, we can really, I use, that kind of work to really delve into that. So some of the means of healing, I open up sedated channels with a very alternative approach that's similar to acupuncture, but I use a mud packing technique. I advocate and I believe in acupuncture, but I use a mud packing technique to reconnect the sedated channels and to turn on the energy points and to reconnect, because we have sedation, just like scar tissue or any type of congestion, that's sedation, and so we want to open it up. And it's, again, not traditional, but I have great success with that. When we do something like that and we open up a trauma, I feel that we always need to support the body, because we're opening up areas of the body that have been sedated and that need to be recharged. So those are organ gland systems. So anatomically, we need to reconnect the way that our bodies are meant to work. So even when I talk about cannabis, and I say it turns on or it supports, there are herbs and there are, different approaches to supporting those specific engines, I call them, of the body, so that they can then communicate what they need to do to all aspects of the body. So, for example, the liver is an engine. It doesn't just detox and purge out toxicity. It actually communicates with all hormones. It puts out and receives all hormones in the body. So our brain cannot function if our liver is not able to communicate with our brain and give it serotonin, melatonin. Same with our reproductive organs, and then we take the approach of, adrenals connect with immune system. So there's inflammatory response. So it's a long, I hope I'm making sense. If we support the engine, the liver, we can reconnect and bounce to make that work. So I use different herbs. I use and I do a lot of emotional, psychological work as well. So, alternative, intuitive work to bring up, not to recreate trauma, but to heal trauma. So,
secondly, as a mental health therapist and an addictions counselor,
awesome.
I want to know how, and I work for a methadone clinic.
Okay.
And so some of the patients are trying to wean themselves off of methadone as well as opiates.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think CBD will help them in
Yes.
that aspect?
Yes.
Great question.
It's a really great
but
question.
when they
Yes.
go through withdrawal and dope sickness, would that help as well?
It would definitely help. And I've had quite a few patients that I help with pain management and coming off. It's a serious, you know this probably because you work in that field. It's not something that we take lightly, and just the way that the traditional medical world handles it is cyclically disastrous, because it never provides or delivers a successful outcome, and I have my own ideas about that too. But with CBD and cannabis, but with CBD, it eases and nourishes those very those very areas of the body. Again, like speaking of the liver, it's a detox organ. That's what's heavily being detoxed, but it communicates with the brain. So, that addiction aspect and what we need. There's so many facets to addiction and to opioid addiction. But if we can nourish and ease the body and we can support as we're coming off of it, then you can come off of it. Giving methadone is just sort of putting a Band-Aid and putting fuel in the fire. It's just giving what... So it's not, we know that. It's not a solution, but I think you have to have a team. And you seem like a lovely teammate, but, I think it's important, to have support too, and the emotional, psychological aspect, not just, the therapeutic approach that you have to go see this therapist and go to this counselor. I mean, that doesn't work either, because there's no means of establishing a relationship. You have to feel safe, and you have to feel that you're not alone, and you have to feel loved, and you have to feel like you can be open, because that's the only way that we can really heal. So, yeah.
Dr. Rothschild, did you
I want
to?
to add one thing here, which is you may be aware that not just CBD, but also full-fledged THC containing medical cannabis has recently been approved for treating opioid dependence and addiction in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So cannabis as exit drug. And that was a pretty progressive, surprisingly progressive thing.
Very progressive.
Yeah.
Really
One of the very
yeah.
few states that allows that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the lady behind you has a question too.
I did have a question, but I'm not sure it's that important, but I'll try.
All questions are important.
What I wanted to know, as the use of marijuana expands, for instance, Canada is going to have marijuana, recreational marijuana, September 1st, and it's spreading all over every state. Will the cost of trial and error come down? Because when you go in and you find out each drug is between $60 and $100, it kind of takes you back. And then you figure, how can you trial and error because it's so expensive? That's my question.
Very good question.
It is a good question.
You want to take that one, Dr. Rothschild?
Sure. Let me put
Maybe we get Solevo there, Sativa, maybe one of those two.
Indico.
Indico. Yeah. Indico. I can't make that joke. I'll put my economics hat on here. Right now in Pennsylvania, there are a very limited number of grower processors, and I don't remember the exact numbers.
I think
but
it's 6 or 7 right now.
Out of a total of how many licenses?
There will be
initially given out?
25. There were 12 given in the first phase.
So half of the grower processors in Pennsylvania that were supposed to have been up and running by now have not been are not up and running, and so it's a the law of supply and demand thing there. If there is more product on the market, the law of supply says that prices will come down, or rather the law of supply
and that's
and
just
demand.
within the medical program here in Pennsylvania.
Right.
That's not even including the street.
Correct.
thing.
And so one would think that I mean, what happens in Canada will not have any direct impact on what happens here, at least in the legal market. If we were to get recreational, or the term people are using these days is adult use. If we were to get that in Pennsylvania, it would create a much larger market, potentially with economies of scale there. Potentially, if that happened, there would be more grower processors that were approved, or the grower processors that have been currently approved will be allowed to expand their facilities even more. So that would suggest that it's likely that prices would come down. We never really know. I mean, what I personally would like to see would be the provision for patients to grow their own. Actually, that is by far the least expensive way to produce cannabis.
That will do it for part 2 of medical marijuana for first-time users. Join us again on the next episode for more with Dr. Rothschild and Mandi Babkes on this Cannabis Conversation from Solevo Wellness. Thanks for listening.